Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
When I was in law school, made a lot of friends in law school. People go off to college and they go off to college with some high school friends or people they knew from high school or the area. I went off to college, I didn't know anybody. And when I went off to law school, it was much of the same. I went from Houghton, Michigan to Beloit, Wisconsin for college. Didn't know anybody, worked out just fine. And then I ended up from Beloit College to the Ohio State University Law School. Didn't know anybody. And so met a lot of great people and a lot of great relationships, still have a lot of good friendships from that experience. There was one particular individual that I'll leave his name out of it, but he was a nice guy. I would work out in the mornings. I would go over to the gym on campus, Larkins Hall, and I would be there early. That's a whole nother conversation. And he would be there early, and we kind of struck up a friendship. And this is a perfect example how you can know and like somebody, but maybe not trust them entirely. But he was a really nice individual, and he was opinionated. He was open to sharing his opinion. Not a shocker, right? It's law school. People come in there, and a lot of people go to law school because they like to argue. I can't say that's necessarily me, but there are people there, and it's what draws people into that, just like medical school draws people in who are really into the sciences. So he was very opinionated, again, which I was okay with. The problem I had is that he was very unaccepting of mine. And he might state something about politics. This was 84 to 88. Reagan was in office, the Iran-Contra affair. There's always something going on in politics. Who am I kidding? But that was, kind of the flavor of the day, if you will. And there were certainly other things going on in local politics or just whatever, things around the law school. There was always something going on. And he would kind of share what he thought. And then if I, unless I was like totally in lockstep with him, yeah, you're totally right. He would just like cut me off. No, you can't believe that. You cannot believe that. It's just not true. And it got to a point where, again, I liked him. I considered him a friend. He had a great sense of humor. And when we weren't talking things that were contentious like that, where, he was kind of in this, I got an opinion that's fact mode, and you can't have anything, you can't believe anything other than that. He was a great person to be around and a lot of fun, And again, I knew him and I liked him. I don't know that I trusted him just because I didn't trust him when it got to those things. I just wanted to walk away. And there were times where things were happening when we'd be in the gym or I would see him around the law school. And the law school is much like high school, right? You're in one building with the same people all day. It's a lot like high school. At least at Ohio State, that's how it was for us. They had a locker and everything. It was really like high school. And not a bad way, but you just really got to know people well. But I would, when I would see him, I'd just kind of avoid him. Oh gosh, I don't want to get into a conversation about this. As I reflected back on that experience, that interaction with him, this particular person, it was a guy. It got me thinking about Dr. Adam Grant's book, Give and Take. And if you're seeing this live, you're seeing me hold up a copy of Dr. Adam Grant's book, Give and Take, which is an awesome book. I've read it several times. I've read it so many times that I just decided I was just going to outline it so I can go read the outline. But there's a lot of great stories in there. There is a story in there. It's chapter 5, The Power of Powerless Communication. And in chapter 5, Dr. Grant, Adam, talks about a particular case. It was an unfair competition case. I won't get into the details of it. Being a former attorney, it certainly caught my attention. But the representative for the plaintiff was kind of he didn't have a lot of experience necessarily, and they were suing 3 other parties, and each of the other parties had high power law firms that had some very, very polished attorneys. Well, the long and the short of it is this particular attorney, his name was Dave. He ended up winning. He ended up winning a judgment. It was like $7 million against these other three plaintiffs, and and it was interesting, certainly for Adam Grant, is that the people who represented the defendants, the three people who represented the defendants, were really polished. They were just super polished, and just think of Perry Mason, or just the person who just kind of comes in court and really not even looks at their notes and just knows step by step what they're where they're starting, where they're going with their argument, and just laying everything out. Whereas Dave wasn't that way at all, and he won. And the interesting thing is that Dave stuttered. He had a horrible time stuttering, and worked through that. And Adam Grant uses that as kind of a jumping off point to really kind of talk about our influence skills. And this kind of dovetails into last week's program on influence. But we all need to influence people to be successful. You need to influence people to hire you, to give you a raise, to buy your products or services, accept your ideas, invest in you, invest time in you. And in the book, he talks about two paths to influence. One is dominance, and the other is prestige. Now, dominance is being strong, it's being powerful, being very authoritative, and prestige is the path of earning people's respect and admiration. And it's interesting because he goes on in the chapter to talk about, he aligns those two styles with really the subject matter of the book, giving and taking. Give and Take's the title of the book. And he aligns the dominant style as being aligned with takers, and the prestige style as people aligned with giving, people who have a propensity to give to other people. And the dominant style, those people or dominants, or the takers, they specialize in powerful communication. They demonstrate their strength by spreading their arms and having dominating poses, raising their eyebrows and challenge, commanding as much physical space as possible, maybe conveying anger, really kind of putting their point across. Much like my friend in law school. I mean, he was just, when you're starting to say to somebody and just somebody cuts you off like that, that's a very dominant sort of a style. And they try to set the tone and control the conversation through verbal and nonverbal type things. And so these dominant styles, these takers, if you will, are much more effective in creating dominance or influence in a situation. And the issue with that is that the dominant style is really kind of a zero-sum game. And this podcast is about, and what I mean by zero-sum game, what I mean by that is that in a zero-sum game, if you win, somebody else has to lose. It's not win-win. This is my opinion. I'm putting forth my opinion. You don't, you can't put forth your opinion. It's a zero-sum game. Whereas the opposite, the prestige style, isn't a zero-sum game. It's this is my opinion. There is room in the world for your opinion. I'm interested in hearing what it is. Doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to agree, but I'm willing to listen to it. I'm willing to give you the space to exist and recognize that, I respect what you're about. And I'm happy to hear what you're saying. And so it's referred to as powerless communication. That's why he calls it powerless communication in the book. And essentially what you're doing with powerless communication is you might be asserting an opinion. You might be talking about something, and I'm talking about things where it's not absolute fact, right? Sun came up this morning at 6:45 a.m. and that's a fact. You can look it up. You can you can argue whether it was cloudy or it was the color of the sky, but it's a fact the sun came up in your particular locale at whatever time. It depends where you live, north or south. But with powerless communication, those communicators, they express doubt with respect to, this is my opinion, this is what I feel, this is my worldview based on my experience. Yours might be different. I'm open to it, and that's how they tend to do it, and they really it helps them in the long run in many ways. It certainly helps them. Um, it certainly helps them with respect to presenting. The people who employ this powerless communication, they're more comfortable expressing their vulnerabilities in talking about a particular topic. If I'm, you're talking on something, it's like, okay, this is what the research says. There might be other research out there, but this is what I know at this point in time. And so you're expressing there might be some doubt as to what you have to say, whereas somebody who has that dominant style in presenting, there is like, this is what it says, and it's black and white, 2 + 2 = 4, and there's no arguing about it, period. And what research has shown is that when people have this powerless style, it really becomes more effective in presenting. Hence the original case that he started the chapter with is this attorney. I'm stuttering here like the attorney. The attorney stuttered, but he was articulate in the arguments he made. And so having powerless communication, you do need to back it up with a level of competence, but people are drawn into that, and you feel like they're giving you a space to draw your own conclusions. I'm vulnerable. I don't know. I'm vulnerable in what I say. Vulnerable in the sense that I'm reasonably confident, but I know there's always a gray area. There's always a gray area with respect to things, and it comes into play in the presenting and also selling. And when people are the takers, and have this dominant style in selling, our product is the very best product, and you would be a fool if you didn't use it. It's a very dominant approach. What they have found through the research is that that style of being very powerful when we're trying to sell people, is that people become suspicious. Very interesting, right? Because I talk to people all the time who are very powerful with respect to their saying. We have a lead gen program. It's amazing. We've looked at all of them out there, and ours is the best. And I'm immediately suspicious by that. All of them? You've looked at them all? How is yours the best? It's just, and I don't really engage in those conversations, but I can just feel my wall of suspicion coming up. It's like, you know what? I don't even want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with it. I prefer to have conversations. And again, this is just me. Here I am being powerless. This is just me. I'm a sample size of one. I'm certainly more than happy to hear you out if you're just kind of talking just talking to share about what you have. When I talk to people about, let's say, AmSpirit Business Connections, I seldom come at somebody and say, yeah, you have to, you need this. You know what? It's not for everybody. Again, that's a powerless kind of a conversation. You can feel the walls come down, and people feel like, what, they have the space to say no. They have the space to inquire, whatever the questions might be. I'm not going to shut them down and say, no, don't ask that question, and so what the research has shown is that people become I don't want to say their guard comes down, because that would imply that they're open to being maybe manipulated, excuse me. But they're certainly more open to having a conversation when we employ this less powerful approach. And so, presenting, selling, the powerless approach works, persuading as well. Now, what you need to understand is that this, my notes are getting all screwed up here. Powerful communication can be very effective in that one shot sort of a thing, right? You're in a job interview. You need to put your best foot forward. I think it would be great for this job because of this. And here are the experiences I have. And you kind of need to be somewhat powerful in that situation. But once you get the job, you kind of need to change a little bit, and you need to talk about you need to have relationships. And again, this is a podcast about relationships. It's not a podcast about hard sell tactics or how to win and the heck with people. It's it's about creating relationships and making friends and things like that, and having these long-term client relationships or employee relationships. And so to have the powerful communication in those settings, it doesn't work long term. It's great to get your foot in the door and get in the door, but once you get in the door, you need to kind of notch it down a little bit and just say, okay, I don't know everything. I'm here. I can add value, or thank you for hiring me as your attorney or your vendor of whatever sorts. I don't know everything about your company. I'm not going to assume that how I served somebody else is going to be perfect for you. And so I really want to take the time to learn and ask questions. And that's another tactic of the powerless communication, is being willing to ask questions, being willing to try and learn about whomever the person is, whatever the situation is. And this is likely true. There you go. Powerless communication. It's likely true in personal relationships as well. People don't like to be dominated. They like to have the space to be able to say, you know what, I disagree. And this is my worldview, and my worldview is different than yours. The last thing with respect to powerless communication is, these givers, these powerless communicators, if you will, the prestige person, they're willing to accept advice. They're willing to come forth and say, I don't know that I necessarily understand. I'm good at A, B, and C. I'm not really good at, or I'm really good at A, B, and C, but D, E, and F, I'm not sure. I can't know everything. And there's something about that draws people to us. Whereas people who are powerful, dominant, they're not going to ask for advice. So anyhow, I've gone longer than I planned to go on this particular topic, but I think it's important that you stop and think about how to communicate. Do you have a dominant style? And again, a dominant style may work in certain situations, right? But you have to understand, if you're looking to build relationship, what you need to employ is a style that's more powerless, and giving people room to question, or giving people the room to understand better, to feel like, to know that you can be part of the communication with you, and not get totally drowned it out.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today, and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.